For decades, feral cats were the leading cause of mammal extinctions in Australia. They hunted even in the most remote corners of the continent. That is why in 1994, Martin Copley built a sanctuary that not a single one of them could enter. But within just a few months, it became clear that even there, the population kept declining. What began as an attempt to save one species ultimately changed the way Australia saves its rarest animals. The cat was brought to the continent in 1788 aboard the ships of the First Fleet as a hunter of rats in the holds. At first, it was kept as a domestic animal. But by the 1820s, the first ships were already recording feral cats in Sydney, and farmers themselves were releasing them into the fields to control rodents and rabbits. The mistake proved catastrophic. The cat took hold faster than anyone could have expected. By 1890, it already occupied more than 90% of the mainland. Today, that is 7.7 million square kilometers, virtually the entire territory of the country. Australia has no natural predators capable of holding the cat in check, nor is there any evolutionary experience among native mammals. Not a single Australian animal grew up alongside a predator that hunts quietly, at night, and leaves no trace. Today, feral cats kill more than 1 billion wild animals every year. The result, over 250 years, at least 33 mammal species have vanished entirely, the highest rate of mammal extinction in the world. Among them, the marsupial wolf, the Tasmanian tiger, the last of which died in a zoo in 1936, the pig-footed bandicoot, the paradise parrot. Each of these species existed for millions of years before humans arrived on the continent and disappeared within the lifetimes of a few generations after the cat appeared. CSIRO economists estimate the annual damage from feral cats in Australia at more than $18.7 billion, more than from any other invasive species in the country, including rabbits and foxes combined. For decades, the government tried to solve the problem with poison, shooting, and baits. No method truly worked. Cats are too clever for baits, too fast for shooting, too numerous for poison scattered across millions of square kilometers. A feral cat hunts at night, alone, and covers up to 10 kilometers in a single night. It skirts baits that smell unfamiliar and learns to avoid traps after the first failed attempt. Unlike the fox, the cat rarely falls for standard poison. It is too fussy about its food. This is a predator that adapts faster than people can devise ways to stop it. A single feral cat in the bush eats an average of 791 animals a year: mammals, birds, reptiles, frogs, plus several hundred more invertebrates. On a national scale, this adds up to a figure that is hard to imagine. Every day, cats kill around 3 million mammals, more than 1 million birds, and more than 1.5 million reptiles. The weight of an adult feral cat is 3 to 6 kilograms, almost twice that of the average house cat. More muscular, more cautious, and completely avoiding humans. Unlike the fox, which leaves tracks and droppings where they are easy to find, the cat hunts and hides in such a way that it can go unnoticed for decades, even in territory regularly surveyed by rangers. The paradox is simple. To save a species, you did not have to reduce the number of cats. You had to create territory where there are no cats at all. There is another reason why fighting the cat with traditional methods is a losing battle from the start. After a bushfire, when the grass and undergrowth burn to nothing, small animals are left without cover. Cats sense this instantly. They migrate into the burned zones and hunt there more intensively, covering up to 30 kilometers a night to reach fresh ashland. In 1989, Martin Copley, an Englishman who had made his fortune in insurance in London, came to visit the ecologist John Walmsley at the Warrawong Sanctuary in South Australia. Walmsley showed him something Copley had never seen before: an area completely enclosed by a special fence, inside which there was not a single cat. That was the moment of decision. In 1991, Copley and his wife Lorraine bought a plot of bush near Chidlow, an hour's drive from Perth, and named it Karakamia. At first they planned a single area, They took 3 adjoining ones as well, so that the boundary would make ecological sense. But the idea and its execution are different things. The first fence at Karakimia, just 6.5 kilometers, was built by a hired manager, Andre Schmitz. The team eradicated foxes and cats inside the perimeter and began releasing woylies, quendas, and tamer wallabies. Before the fence, only 3 species of native mammal remained on this land: the echidna, the gray kangaroo, and the possum, those that had somehow learned to survive alongside the predator. Today, on those same 268 hectares, 23 species of mammal, 124 species of bird, and 34 species of reptile are recorded. Some were brought there deliberately, but some returned on their own. The yellow-footed antechinus, which no one released, came into the forest by itself as soon as the predator that had made this little marsupial easy prey was gone. Part of it worked immediately. Part of it did not. The numbat, the emblem of Western Australia, was among the first released into Karakimia. The population never took hold. The territory turned out to be too small for a viable group of animals that need a large foraging range of termites. On his own land, Copley ran into the very thing the whole idea of the fence had begun with. Desire alone and one fence are not enough. Scale is needed. Several attempts to fix the situation simply by adding more animals achieved nothing. The numbats kept dispersing beyond the boundaries of territory they physically could not feed themselves in. The answer did not come from Karakimia. Since the mid-1980s, the Western Australian Department of Conservation had been running its own numbat reintroduction program in parallel, releasing animals at Boyagan, Dryandra, the Stirling Range, and several other sites in the state. There they had already accumulated what Copley did not know. In some reserves, the population held on for years. In others, it disappeared within a season, and each time the difference came down to the same thing: the size of the territory capable of feeding the species, and how consistently predator control was maintained there. When these data reached Copley, it became clear. The numbat at Karakimia did not lack safety. It lacked space. And it was precisely this understanding that shaped every subsequent Australian Wildlife Conservancy project, from Peruna to Scotia, where enough land was finally found for the numbat. So the mechanism Copley copied from Wamsley and then brought to engineering precision together with his team grew more complex with each new project. A fence 1.8 meters high, the upper part angled outward, a floppy top. The mesh sags under the cat's weight and does not let it climb over. At the bottom, a mesh apron buried in the ground or pressed against it, so the animal cannot dig under. But even a perfect fence does not guarantee zero. In later AWC projects, the organization Copley founded, a single fox eluded the team's traps for 6 months during the construction of the fence at Mallee Cliffs. We began the eradication program in August, but we caught the last fox only in February, recounted AWC operations manager Bruce Summerfield. It turned out that several individuals had been digging under part of the fence. An additional 11 kilometers of mesh apron had to be buried before the territory was truly clean. After the fence is finished, the hardest part is only beginning. The team goes inside and completely destroys every cat and every fox with traps, poison baits, and nighttime shooting using thermal imagers, and continues monitoring for months, combing hundreds of kilometers of tracks with cameras and sand before officially declaring the territory feral-free. A single cat left unnoticed is capable of quietly wiping out an entire newly released population within a few weeks. Cats kill more than they can eat, and hunt prey that has never seen such a predator before and has no instinct to flee. That is why almost clean territory does not count. Only 0 counts. On December 22, 1994, the Premier of Western Australia, Richard Court, officially opened Karakimia. On the same day, the team released the first woylies and quendas behind the just completed fence, the first such release in the state's history. Until that moment, not a single private sanctuary in Australia had dared to tell an endangered species, "This is now your home forever, and we guarantee that not a single cat will ever enter here again." Every kilometer of such a fence costs tens of thousands of dollars. Maintenance is constant. Floods tear the mesh, trees fall on the posts, fires require annual controlled burns around the perimeter. This is not a one-time investment, but a lifelong commitment. Copley understood this early. That is why he did not stop at Caracamaya. In 1998 came Peruna, a corridor between two national parks. Then Four Island in Shark Bay, where the team removed not only cats, but also more than 2,000 feral goats. This was a different kind of challenge. Water all around. An island of 4,500 hectares, surrounded by ocean instead of wire. The Australian Wildlife Conservancy team tracked down the last cats for months, trap by trap, until no tracks remained at all. When a year had passed without a single cat print on the island's sand, Fauray was officially recognized as free of the predator. At that moment, it was the third largest island in the world from which people had managed to completely remove feral cats. Today, 4 species of mammal live there that had been absent for decades, including the Shark Bay mouse, which survives nowhere else on the mainland. Then came Scotia and New South Wales. With each project, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy team learned from previous mistakes. Larger territories, thicker aprons, more careful selection of species to suit the particular landscape. The numbat was eventually reintroduced successfully, but no longer at Caracamaya, rather in the vast Scotia and Yookamurra, where there was enough space. One cat is enough to prove this in practice. At a bird sanctuary near Mandurah in the southwest, more than 200 chicks of a rare tern, a species listed as endangered, hatched over one season. A single white, neutered cat with no collar broke into the colony again and again. Within a few weeks, almost all the chicks were gone, the adults abandoned nesting, and the colony that had formed over years fell apart in a single season. Investigators confirmed it from the tracks in the sand and the beheaded carcasses. One animal, and years of work erased. This was Copley's true method, a readiness to build, to fail, to rebuild, and not to stop. In 2004, at Scotia, AWC launched a project to restore endangered mammals on the largest mainland predator-free territory at the time. In the first year, more than 500 animals of 5 species were released into the Stage 1 zone, 4,000 hectares. And while Scotia was only just beginning, a catastrophe no one had foreseen was unfolding across the rest of the country. Between 1999 and 2006, the population of the woylie, the very species Copley had started with at Caracamaya, fell by 90%, from about 250,000 individuals to 33,000. The cause has still not been definitively established: foxes, cats, possibly a disease that makes the animal more vulnerable to the predator. Scientists across Western Australia watched populations vanish one after another. But when the data at Caracamaya was checked, it turned out that here the population had not budged. A steady 400 to 500 animals, year after year, behind the fence Copley had built 17 years earlier. While the country was losing the species before its eyes, 268 hectares near Perth remained the only place where the catastrophe simply did not happen. By then, this was the most ambitious wildlife restoration project on the Australian mainland, and a model that government parks across the country would begin to copy. The last fence Copley would see completed was Mount Gibson, June 2014. 43 kilometers, 7,800 hectares, a plan to reintroduce at least 10 species, including the numbat and the bilby. He died on July 30th, 5 weeks later. At the time of his death, the organization he had begun with a single plot and 6.5 kilometers of wire was managing 23 sanctuaries across more than 3 million hectares. His personal contribution over 23 years is estimated at $70 million. A year after his death, in 2015, the team he had built launched at New Haven one of the largest feral cat eradication projects on the planet, a territory of 9,450 hectares for at least 10 species, including the mala and the golden bandicoot. The fence there eventually grew to 44.2 kilometers, over 8,500 posts, 400 kilometers of wire, 1 million clips, the largest such fence in the Southern Hemisphere. The method that began as a failure on 268 hectares had, in 20 years, become a nationwide system. In total, over the years of its work, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy has moved representatives of 32 species between its territories, not counting releases within each individual sanctuary. Each such translocation is a separate operation: capture, veterinary examination, transport, months of post-release monitoring. A network that began as one plot and one fewer cat has turned into a logistical system that continually redistributes life countrywide, taking a species from where it is safe and returning it to where it had disappeared. Today, Copley's network is more than 240 kilometers of fencing across 10 territories. The Australian Wildlife Conservancy directly manages 6.8 million hectares and protects a further 6.1 million hectares through partnerships. The organization safeguards 74% of Australia's mainland mammal species and 88% of its bird species. Since 2013, the patron of AWC has been Prince Charles, today King Charles III. Among its supporters is Sir David Attenborough. His name is now borne by the AWC field station in the Artesian Range. But there is a problem the organization speaks of less often than its successes. These territories are islands of safety in an ocean of threat. Australia's largest fenced sanctuaries together cover a few hundred square kilometers. The mainland, where cats continue to hunt unimpeded, is 7.6 million square kilometers. Researchers from the National Environmental Science Program uncovered an even sharper detail. For several years running, newly built fences in Australia added no new protected species at all. They simply duplicated protection for animals that already had refuge behind other fences, while dozens of species in critical need of protection still have no fenced territory of any kind. The animals inside the fences are technically wild, but they live within limits that humans defined with a line of wire, and whether this is the salvation of a species or a network of cageless zoos scattered across the country, the Australian conservation community has still not definitively decided. The team Copley left behind is trying to resolve this very contradiction with technology. In 2025, at the same Caracamia where it all began, AWC tested SmartGate, an AI-based gate that recognizes the species of an animal in real time and opens only for native creatures, leaving cats and foxes outside. The idea is simple. If a fence cannot be open, make it smart. Allow wildlife to venture beyond the zoo and return without letting the enemy in. The first tests with woylies went well. Whether this can be scaled to thousands of kilometers of fencing across the country is a question that has no answer yet. Today, the organization Copley began with the intention of buying a single plot of land has announced a plan worth $100 million by 2035 to expand its area of influence to 5% of Australia's territory, more than all of Germany, and to increase by 50% the number of species protected from cats and foxes. In the words of AWC's chief executive, Tim Allard, the extinction crisis is here, now, and we need to act at scale. The question that remains open is whether it is even possible to build enough fences for a continent of this size, or whether a system of islands of safety is the most this model is capable of. But when, that December of 1994, Copley stood beside the newly opened Caracamia and watched the first woylies disappear into the scrub beyond the fence, despite the fact that the numbat never took hold there, he already knew the main thing. Sometimes, to stop a catastrophe that humans created, you do not need $1 billion and a government decree. You need one person willing to buy one plot, to make mistakes, to try again, and not to stop until the country understands that it is possible.